Good to see everyone here this morning. My name is Darrell Baldwin, and I want to welcome everyone to the third biennial Myaamiaki Language and Cultural Revitalization Conference. It's kind of incredible how things grow so quickly. We put on this conference every other year to kind of give us a year to catch our breath, and so that every time we put this conference on, we're actually bringing out some very new materials and new research. I'm very, very proud this year to see the kind of growth and expansion that's happened. The list of speakers that we have this year are primarily made up of all tribal members. And I think that kind of speaks to the growth that's occurred and the role that tribal members are beginning to play in our own research effort as well as our language and cultural initiatives. This year's theme is Nippon Dingi, which is our term for education, or to learn or teach from each other. And as we begin to look at language and culture as more of a revitalization process, we realize that it has to be situated within the larger scope of overall education. And so we're really beginning to look at that. I'm also very proud to say that we have nearly 20 tribe students on campus, which is a huge growth from our last conference. The speakers, most all, will have shirts like this, and all of our tribe students and those that are helping with the conference will have red colored shirts. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask any of them. They're going to be available throughout the day. There's also a little daycare down at the end. We don't necessarily advertise it so that we don't have everybody just dropping off kids and going on vacation for the day. But we do offer daycare for this conference, so people who are serious about attending the conference, we try to accommodate that. It's very common in Indian country for whole families to attend events, so we try to accommodate that. And I want to try to get started on time. Before we do that, I want to introduce some key people, and what I mean by key people are some of our tribal leaders that are here. It's really, really important that our language and cultural efforts would not be where they are without the support of our tribal leaders. And I think it's very, very important to understand that language and culture is a sovereignty issue. And to have the support of our leaders is something we're very fortunate to have. I think one of them is still on its way down, and so I'm going to introduce Danya Williams, who's our second council person, traveled here from Oklahoma, and Mr. Jim Batiste in the back there, who's our council person as well. Our chief could not make it today for other reasons, and so the rest of the tribal council has been able to make it, and we're very honored to be here in their presence. So I'd like to ask Jim Batiste to come up and just do a very short welcome, and then we'll begin.
Well, first of all, I wasn't going to talk, but I guess I will. So first of all, I'd like to welcome you all to the conference here and everything, and the importance of these conferences and such and what they've done. I came to one, I think it was 6 years ago, and it was really people coming from all over to kind of make up this thing. And now, as Darrell said, it's mainly tribal people that are giving this. I also would like to thank the university for providing these wonderful facilities and always making this such a grandeur event and so well run and everything. I think one of the things that has really come out of this that's so important is because of Darrell and Wes Leonard and David Costa and all the people that have worked so hard on our language to revitalize it, that is now making, I think, even not only a national but an international impact to say that our language was never dead. It was only resting. Welcome.
Okay, our first presenter is Dr. David Costa, somebody I've known for many years and has become an integral part of our language efforts. Comes all the way from California. David sits on our language committee with myself and Dr. Wes Leonard, who will be presenting later. And we'll let him get started with his presentation on Myaamia, Winter Stories within Algonquin.
trying to figure out can you hear me properly here? Okay. I just wanted to say, this year I've been to 2 of these conferences before, and this year I'm apparently the only non-tribal presenter, and evidently the only person not presenting on education, which is, I guess, why I was put first. So I wanted to say I'm very honored to be here. But I was instructed before I started writing my paper to keep the linguistic jargon and the linguistic technical stuff to an absolute minimum, and I managed. There's virtually none of it in the paper, so. Yeah. Among all Algonquian tribes, from the Great Plains to the Atlantic coast, there exists a category of oral literature, often known in English as winter stories. Winter stories are legends traditionally told only in wintertime, especially at night, around communal fires. They often describe the deeds and adventures of legendary heroes, as well as describing the origins of humans, animals, spirit beings, and the world around us. Not all Myaami and Peoria stories qualify as winter stories. There are, in fact, 2 kinds of stories among the Myaami and Peoria. The first category, which I will not discuss here, are simple stories which are not described any great legendary or spiritual significance. These are known in Myaami as ajimuna. In the category of ajimuna are such things as biographical or autobiographical stories, genealogical and historical narratives, and personal anecdotes. The other category are winter stories, known in Myaami as alsurkana. In the late 1890s, linguist Albert Gatchett, who worked extensively with members of the Myaami, Wea, and Peoria tribes, reported that the Myaami told him that, quote, "Winter tales were not to be told in summertime, lest these monsters come out at night, get into the beds of those recounting their stories, going directly for the teller. There were many of these stories, and when they were related on right cold days, the weather would become still colder." This is very, very common belief found across Algonquin. We are fortunate that several Myaami and Peoria ajimuna and winter stories were written down in the late 1800s and early 1900s in both Indiana and Oklahoma. In this paper, I will discuss 2 Miami, Illinois winter stories, one a Wisaka-Chakwa tale from Elizabeth Valley, and second, a version of the traditional Algonquian story, The Shut-Eye Dancers, from Peoria Bill Sky. My primary goal will be to compare and contrast these stories with equivalent winter stories found among neighboring Algonquian tribes. Elizabeth Valley, aka Valier, I may sometimes slip and call her Valier, but I think Valley was actually the name she really went by, was a Miami Indian born in 1813 in western Ohio. Later in her childhood, she moved to Indiana, joining the Eel River Band. As a young woman, she moved to Kansas and eventually to Oklahoma. Although she was clearly born in Miami, Valley later married into the Peoria tribe and was placed on the Peoria rolls in 1867. She was living with the Peorias when Gatchett interviewed her in 1895 and continued to live with them until her death in 1899. Valley was the oldest Miami, Illinois speaker Gatchett worked with. In fact, she did not speak English, and so Gatchett had to employ Wea speaker Sarah Wadsworth as an interpreter in his work with her. Gatchett elicited 6 stories from Valley, all of them winter stories. The longest, and arguably most important, is her story of Wisaka-Chakwa, which takes up 25 handwritten pages in Gatchett's notebook at the Smithsonian. Wisaka-Chakwa is the Miami, Illinois culture hero. He is known for his humorous bungling as well as his conniving and lack of common sense. He has direct correspondence in all the neighboring tribes, such as the Meskwakis Wisakeha, the Kikapus Withakeha, the Menominees Metnapus, the Ojibwes Nenabuju, forgive my pronunciation of these, and Wisakechak of the Cree, especially close phonetically. Valley's Wisaka-Chakwa story is not so much a story per se, but rather a loose assemblage of free-floating episodes. It no doubt represents just a fraction of what used to be a much larger Miami Wisaka-Chakwa story cycle. Valley's Wisaka-Chakwa stories are entirely typical of Great Lakes Algonquian stories, in that all of its scenes have parallels in winter stories from neighboring tribes, especially the Meskwaki, Menominee, Kickapoo, and Ojibwe. In Valley's story, Wisaka-Chakwa travels around visiting friends who all feed him by performing various magic feats. Then, when Wisaka-Chakwa is visited in return, he tries to show off by feeding his guests the same way they fed him, but he always fails miserably, often horribly injuring himself in the process. This is a very common motif in Algonquian winter stories. To begin, note the opening scene in Valley's Myaami-Wisaka-Chakwa story. Wisaka-Chakwa was living at a place and he had a wife. Once he went to see his friend Fox Squirrel. There he was fed nut meats. "Take some," Fox Squirrel told him. "Take the leftovers back to your children," he was told. "Just like this, my friend. We eat stuff just like this," Wisaka-Chakwa replied. "You must come and visit me sometime." And so Fox Squirrel went visiting. He went to see his friend Wisaka-Chakwa. Wisaka-Chakwa told Fox Squirrel, "Come in, my friend, sit down." Then Wisaka-Chakwa tried to feed him nut meats, but he failed in trying to cut a hole in himself. Instead, blood just poured out. Nut meats were supposed to pour out. He gouged himself for no good reason. Wisaka-Chakwa tries to copy anything he sees anyone else doing, and he fails. And so he failed to feed Fox Squirrel nut meats. Fox Squirrel went back home and Wisaka-Chakwa could not feed him. Although there are documented stories among the Ojibwe that are similar to this, the closest parallel to this scene in any neighboring tribe story I have found is the Menominee version obtained in 1920, entitled Metnapus Goes A-Visiting. Remember, Metnapus is the Menominee equivalent of Wisaka-Chakwa. This version is a good deal less terse than Valley's Myaami version and clarifies much of what's really going on in the story as well. Then one day, Metnapus said, "Well now, I have to be going on a visit. I'll go visit my little brother Squirrel." So he set out. When he got there and entered his little brother's lodge, after a while Squirrel said, "Well, what can we give Metnapus here to eat?" Then to his wife he said, "Well, at any rate, hang up a kettle of water." When Squirrel's wife had hung up the kettle, he told his wife, "Now bring the awl." Then Squirrel began to chatter. He climbed the frame of the cooking place. He squatted right above where the kettle hung. Then suddenly, with that awl, he jabbed his testicles. Lo and behold, wild rice. Really and truly, that rice poured out in a steady flow. Into the kettle it streamed. Then Squirrel came down. He handed the awl to his wife. Then, when the rice was done cooking, Metnapus was served a meal. Then early the next morning, Metnapus went home. So on the next day, Squirrel was hungry. "Well, I guess I might as well visit Metnapus," he said. When Squirrel had reached Metnapus's lodge and entered and sat down, Metnapus spoke up. "Now then, what shall we give my little brother to eat?" Metnapus asked his wife. "Well, at any rate, hang up a kettle of water." But his wife answered him, "There he goes again. I bet he's been off seeing someone doing something or other. Oh, you just hurry up." So then the woman set to work and hung up the water. When she had done so, Metnapus called out to his wife, "Now bring the awl." When she gave him the awl, Metnapus began to chatter. He made the kind of noise that squirrels always make. Then, at a certain moment, he flung himself from the cooking frame of the hearth. He couldn't climb it. At last, with much fuss, he squatted where the kettle was hanging. There he kept chattering. Then all at once he jabbed his testicles with the awl. Oh, the blood streamed forth. "Dear me, what is he doing?" cried Metnapus's wife. "You're making a dirty mess all over the place." Then Metnapus toppled over and fell. He lay by the edge of the hearth face up. After a little while he got up. "Yes, this is the way it always goes with me when my wife is about to make her fire." Then Squirrel spoke. "Well, hang up some fresh water." Then he asked Metnapus for the awl. Squirrel climbed it right up the cooking frame, right above where the kettle hung, and pierced his testicles. Lo and behold, wild rice. The rice all poured into the kettle. They at last had their meal. When they had eaten breakfast, Squirrel went home. While the Myaami version has Squirrel feeding Wisaka-Chakwa nut meats, and the Menominee version he feeds Metnapus wild rice, the most obvious difference is that the Menominee storyteller makes explicit the fact that Squirrel was piercing his testicles to feed Metnapus. Elizabeth Valley seems to have wanted to avoid expressing this directly, though Gatchett indicates his notes that he understood that this was what was implied. Possibly his interpreter told him. Next in the Myaami-Wisaka-Chakwa story comes a lengthy scene where Wisaka-Chakwa and Bear visit each other. Then Wisaka-Chakwa said to his wife, "I'm going to visit Fox Squirrel's friend. I'm lonely." And so he went to visit Bear. Then his friend Bear said, "Here comes my friend Wisaka-Chakwa. Come in, my friend." Then Bear said to his wife, "Spread something out where my friend Wisaka-Chakwa can sit. What shall we feed your brother-in-law?" "Turn around," Bear told his wife. And then Wisaka-Chakwa closely watched what Bear did. Bear cut the tenderloin out of his wife. When Bear finished cooking it for him, Wisaka-Chakwa was fed with it. Then Bear pierced his wife's. "Oh, just like this. As for me, we eat stuff just like this, my friend," Wisaka-Chakwa said. And then, in the same way, Wisaka-Chakwa said to Bear, "You must come and see us, my friend." Then Wisaka-Chakwa headed home. Then it was Bear's turn to come visit. Wisaka-Chakwa said to his wife, "Ho, here comes my friend Bear. Let's spread something out where he can sit down." "Come in, my friend," Wisaka-Chakwa said to Bear, and then Bear sat down. "What should we feed your brother-in-law?" Wisakachakwa asked his wife. "There isn't anything to feed him with." Then he said to her, "Give me a knife." "What will you do with it?" his wife asked him. It was as if she didn't know what he was going to feed him. "Turn around," he said to his wife. "What are you going to do?" his wife asked. "Sit down and turn around." And Wisakachakwa cut into his wife's back so as to cut out her tenderloin. She cried and cried as he cut out her tenderloin. As he cut it out, Bear gathered up the ashes and tossed them onto the place where Wisakachakwa had cut her tenderloin out. Then Bear rubbed in the ashes. It healed back up from where he had cut it out. Wisakachakwa failed to feed his friend. He just fed himself again. "How did you do it, my friend?" Bear asked. "I did it the same way you fed me," Wisakachakwa said, and so Bear went home. This is fairly close to a Nanabuju story given in Ojibwe in 1904, entitled "Nanabuju is Fed Meat from the Back of a Woman." Now, living in a place were some people, the two children of Nanabuju and his wife. And so there, where they passed the winter, they had hardly any food. They became hungry. Once when they were walking around, Nanabuju came to where some people lived. Two children and the man were at home. Then the man said to his wife, "Why, let's feed our visitor." Now the woman was sitting facing the door. Then she hung up her kettle from a hook. Now while the man was sharpening his knife, his wife was weaving a bag. And when he had finished sharpening his knife, he moved over to sit next to his wife. Then, unfastening his wife's shoulder straps, he exposed her at the back. He then sliced her down the middle of the back with a knife. He then sliced away a piece of fat from her. His wife didn't budge one bit. And so when he had sliced a piece from his wife's back, she put it into the kettle to boil. Picking up some charcoal, he then rubbed it on her back. Then he fastened her garment on again. And not one bit had his wife moved. And when she had finished with the cooking, they said to Nanabuju, "Well, now you may as well eat." Then Nanabuju ate right after the fat was boiled. Nanabuju left a certain amount of it on his plate. "Take your leftovers to your children," they told Nanabuju. "Now tomorrow you visit me," Nanabuju replied. Later Nanabuju arrived home. Now he brought home to his children what he had been given to eat. Nanabuju sat at home waiting for his visitors. At last they came. "Oh, see, here is a visitor," he said. So when the visitor came in and sat down. "What shall we feed the visitor?" asked his wife. Nanabuju hung up the kettle. When he unfastened his wife's shoulder straps, he uncovered his wife's back. He then sliced her down the back with a knife. Naturally, she cried in pain. His visitor smiled. "Let me do it, Nanabuju," he said. When Nanabuju gave him the knife, the visitor sliced the woman down the back, and she didn't wince at all. He cut her fat from her. When it was cut from her, he said to Nanabuju, "Now, Nanabuju, cook it." Taking up some charcoal, he rubbed Nanabuju's wife on the back with it. Then, rising to his feet, the visitor told him, "Now, Nanabuju, your children will eat." Then the visitor left to go on his way. Then Nanabuju and his family ate. Aside from the fact that the Ojibwe version is more detailed, the two versions here are extremely similar. The most substantial difference is that in the Myaami, it is Bear who cuts meat out of his wife's back, while in the Ojibwe version, it is apparently a human who does this. In the next Myaami scene, Wisakachakwa and Woodpecker visit each other. The next day, Wisakachakwa again went off to visit his friend Woodpecker. Then Woodpecker said to his wife, "Here comes my friend Wisakachakwa. Spread something out where he can sit down." "Come in, my friend. Sit down, my friend," said Woodpecker and his little children. Then Woodpecker asked his wife, "What shall we feed your brother-in-law Wisakachakwa?" "Spread something out over there by the shellbark hickory." And then Woodpecker started to climb the tree. Then, as Woodpecker's wife held a wooden dish, Woodpecker climbed up and knocked down cracklings. He told his wife they should feed him cracklings instead of grubworms. Then Woodpecker said, "Eat, my friend. What shall I feed you? This is the only thing we eat. Take the leftovers back to your children. Your children will eat it." "We eat the same stuff. We eat it," Wisakachakwa said to Woodpecker. Then, as Wisakachakwa started to head home, he said to Woodpecker, "Come and see me, my friend." Then Wisakachakwa went off and cut a stick. He went back home. As he walked along, he whittled the stick. He carved woodpecker bills out of the stick. Then, in the morning, his friend Woodpecker was coming. Wisakachakwa fastened the fake bills onto the noses of his children and his wife and himself. He fastened them to their noses. "My friend Woodpecker is coming," Wisakachakwa said to his wife. "Why spread something out where he can sit down?" "Come in, my friend. Sit down. Why aren't you cooking something?" he said. "What will I put on to cook?" "Over yonder near the tree. Spread something out," Wisakachakwa replied. And then Wisakachakwa climbed up a tree. "Bring a dish," he said to his wife. Then Wisakachakwa pecked at the tree, ramming the fake bill onto his nose. Then he fell down and blood ran out from his nose. Then Woodpecker ran out and he knocked over some cracklings and fed his friend in return. Wisaka said, I used to do things this way, but now I fail. What's wrong with me? And so Woodpecker headed back. This story has parallels in Meskwaki, Ojibwe, and Menominee, though the Ojibwe Nanabojo story given here is typical. I won't read this one out loud because I don't have enough time to read all of the other versions out loud. But this scene is primarily different from the Myaami one in that in the Ojibwe version, Woodpecker is trying to peck raccoons out of the tree rather than cracklings. And in the Ojibwe version, Nanabojo kills himself copying this, while Wisaka merely bloodies himself. In the next scene in the Myaami version, Wisaka and Beaver visit each other. And then Wisaka said, I'm going to visit my friend Beaver next. Here comes your brother-in-law, Beaver said to his wife. Spread something out where he can sit down. Come in, my friend, sit down, Beaver said to his friend. What will we feed your brother-in-law? Hang up the kettle, Beaver said to his wife. And Beaver called one of his sons, and then he killed his son. He cooked the child. And so Wisaka was fed with the old beaver. Then Beaver said, my friend, put all the bones here in this wooden dish. Then Wisaka put all the bones there, except for one that he secretly kept in his mouth. Then Beaver went to the river to throw the bones out, and then he called up his son. Come, little Beaver, he said. Beaver's son came back, but he was crying. Beaver said to him, what is wrong with you? Then to Wisaka, Beaver said, my friend, what have you done to hurt my child? One joint of his little finger is missing. Wisaka felt around in his mouth. He found it and took it out. He gave it back to his friend, and as he began to leave, he said to his friend Beaver, come and visit me sometime. Then Wisaka left. So then Beaver went to visit his friend Wisaka. Here comes my friend Beaver. Let's spread something out where he can sit down. Wisaka said to his wife, come in, sit down, my friend, make a fire. Aren't you going to cook something for your brother-in-law Beaver? What shall we feed him? Wisaka asked. So the woman hung up the kettle. After some water had boiled, Wisaka called for his son, little Wisaka. What are you going to do? Little Wisaka asked. It seemed as if he didn't know what was going to be done. Then Wisaka killed his son and put him on to cook. While he cut up his son, his wife cried and cried. My son, she cried. I'll never see my son again. And so Wisaka fed his friend Beaver. He set down a wooden plate there. Put the bones here, my friend, he said to Beaver. Then Wisaka threw the bones away into the water. And then Wisaka said to his wife, call our son. The woman was weeping. She couldn't call him, so he did not come. Then Beaver called Wisaka's son. This time he came. Then Beaver went home. This story is a very close parallel in the Meskwaki story Wisakeha visits the beaver, collected in 1902. The Meskwaki version of the scene leaves fewer things unexplained than the Myaami version. Crucially, in the rather terse Myaami version, the valley does not explain why Wisaka hides the little finger of Beaver's child in his mouth, although the Meskwaki version explains that since this little finger was missing when the bones of Beaver's child were thrown into the water, this explains why the claws on Beaver's paws are shaped the way they are, with a missing joint on their little fingers. And finally, let's see here. The last major scene of the Myaami story has Wisaka and Kingfisher visiting each other. And so the next day, Wisaka went to visit Kingfisher. Kingfisher said to his wife, here comes my friend Wisaka. Spread something out where he can sit down. Come in, sit down, my friend. Make a fire. Hang the kettle up. What should we feed him then? And so Kingfisher went to the river and called a fish. A pike came. Kingfisher dropped into the water and caught the pike and pulled it ashore. He put the fish on to cook and fed Wisaka with it. Of what he had left, he said, take it along to your children. Maybe they will eat the fish, just like we eat, my friend. You must come and see me next, my friend, Wisaka said to Kingfisher. So then Wisaka went home. The next day, Kingfisher went out to visit Wisaka. Wisaka put white cloths around the necks of his children and his wife and himself. And then he said to his wife, here comes my friend Kingfisher. Let's spread something out where he can sit down. He greeted Kingfisher. Come in, sit down, my friend, he told his wife. Cook something. His wife was already scared. What will I put on to cook? Make a fire. Hang up the kettle, Wisaka answered. Then Wisaka ran out to call up a fish. A pike came. Wisaka jumped towards it, trying to catch the pike. But the fish came up with its mouth open and swallowed up Wisaka. Time passed. Then Wisaka's wife became frightened. She said to Kingfisher, brother-in-law, what's happened to Wisaka? He's gone forever. Then a kingfisher rushed over to the river. He called up a fish and caught it and took it out of the water. He cut open the fish's belly. There Wisakachaka sat inside the fish, and his hair was all rotted off. That's the reason why white men have bald heads. This scene has a close match in a Kickapoo story when Withakeha went visiting, collected in 1903. The major difference between the two versions here is that in the Kickapoo version, Withakeha dives after a fish and is stunned when it turns out to be a tree, while in the Miami version, Wisakachaka is swallowed by the fish. Also, Wisakachaka ties white cloths around his children's neck to make them look like kingfishers in the Miami story, which is paralleled in the Kickapoo story by Withakeha tying fake bills to his faces of his children for the same reason. Finally, Valley gives the following conclusion to her story. And so Wisakachaka felt ashamed. He locked his children up in the tent. "Don't look at me," he said to his children and wife. "I'm ashamed of myself. I'm going to leave you all." And so Wisakachaka headed off towards the sky. "Don't look at me," he said to his children and wife. His wife wondered what he would do. She secretly raised the edge of the tent and watched her husband. He just went up and up. But then he fell back and fell into a big hollow tree full of leaves. That's the reason why Wisakachaka got his name, from always doing like he saw others do. This conclusion resembles a passage in the Kickapoo story, Withakeha and the Buzzard. In this story, Buzzard is carrying Withakeha high up in the air when Withakeha finally gets tired and lets go. Soon indeed, Withakeha was unable to hang on any longer. He let go. He dropped down and down. He fell towards the ground. He fell for 10 years. Suddenly he saw trees in the distance. What shall I do, he thought. He became a leaf. He dropped into a hollow tree. At this point, with the time I have left, I would like to shift to a discussion of a different story. I would now like to talk about Peoria speaker Bill Skye's version of the famous Pan-Algonquian story, The Shut-Eye Dancers, which Truman Michelson got from Skye in English in 1916. This is not a Wisakachaka story, but rather involves Fox and Wolf. Fox is the Miami, Illinois trickster, and there are several recorded stories about Fox and Wolf from both Miami's and Peoria's. Wolf was walking along the bank of a lake. There were ducks swimming in the lake, and they called out to Wolf, "What have you got in your sack?" Wolf replied, "Songs." The ducks wanted Wolf to sing for them. They wanted to dance. They asked if he had any songs for them. Wolf said, "I have a song for you to dance to, but you must all shut your eyes." The ducks gathered round Wolf on the bank. They began to dance as Wolf started singing, "You must all shut your eyes." He kept it up. Wolf said, "Keep your eyes shut while you dance, and when I change my song, you must all make a big noise." Wolf kept singing, "You must keep your eyes shut. Anyone who looks at me will die." Whenever Wolf started the song over again, the ducks would make a noise. When they did this, Wolf would grab the duck nearest to him, break their necks, and throw them to the side. He killed a bunch of ducks this way. There was a mud hen dancing with the ducks. Mud hen was out in the darkest place. He happened to open his eyes and saw Wolf killing all the ducks. Mud hen called the other ducks, "Get out of here, he's killing us, he'll kill us all." The remaining ducks all flew off, and that was the end of them. They were all gone. Wolf picked up the ducks he had killed and set out to find a camping place where he could build a fire. When the fire burned down, he raked up the hot ashes and charcoal and put the ducks in to roast them. When he had put the ducks on to roast, he told his brother, his anus, to watch the ducks. Wolf got sleepy after a little while, and so he said, "I'm going to lie down and take a nap now, so you watch the ducks. Fox might come along and steal them." After a while, Fox indeed came across Wolf. While Wolf was asleep, his anus would shoo Fox off. "Shh!" And Wolf would wake up. Whenever Wolf got up, he'd look at the ducks in the fire and turn them. He would then lay down to sleep again and told his anus, "You watch our ducks." His brother Anus warned Wolf again with "shh," the same noise as before. Again, Wolf jumped up. He laid down again and told his brother to watch. His brother began to call again, just as he had before, but couldn't wake Wolf up. When Fox saw that Wolf was sound asleep, he came to the fire, pulled out the ducks, and ate them. After Fox ate them, he stuck the duck's feet back in the fire. Finally, Wolf woke up and said, "Anus, I think our ducks are done." When he got up, he pulled out one of the feet, but there was no duck there. He kept on until he had pulled all the feet out of the ashes, but the ducks were all gone. When Wolf saw they were all gone, he picked up a piece of wood with fire on the end of it and went after his anus. He said, "Now, Anus, I told you to watch these ducks. I have to punish you for this." He held the burning stick against his buttocks and burned himself. Then Wolf chased after Fox, who had run down the river. The first tree that Fox came to leaned out over the water. Fox ran up the tree. When Wolf came, he thought Fox had jumped in the river because he saw Wolf's reflection in the water. Wolf said, "You had better not think you can get away from me. I'm going to kill you." Wolf jumped in the river and dove down, trying to find Fox. Wolf would come back to land, but looking back would always see Fox sitting in the exact same place. Wolf stood on the bank and looked down. "You better not think you're going to get away from me. I'm going to kill you." Wolf got some rocks and tied them around his neck with bark. He said, "Now I'm going to get you." He jumped into the river, and as long as he could hold his breath, he hunted for Fox. He ran out of breath and tried to come up, but he couldn't. When Wolf was drowning, he couldn't hold his bowels. They floated up, and that was all Fox could see of him. Fox said, "That's the end of Wolf." There are numerous versions of this story all over the Algonquian area, and probably outside Algonquian too. And every scene in the Peoria version is matched in some version in another language. But this excerpt from the Kickapoo story, Withakeha and the Drum, is typical. Again, I don't have the time to read this, but you can glance at it. To summarize, actually here, put that away. It is clear from the stories we have that the Miami, Illinois-speaking peoples had a rich oral literature. They shared an especially large amount with groups such as the Meskwaki, Kickapoo, Menominee, and Ojibwe, and less with the Shawnee or Cree. Much of the known oral literature of the Miami, Illinois peoples has very close matches with these other tribes, reflecting both a shared Algonquian inheritance as well as a culture shaped by influences passing back and forth among the different tribes. Of course, there are also features of Miami, Illinois oral literature that are unique to the Miami. There are also Miami stories of Wilaktua, a malevolent and intelligent trickster. Stories of Wamba, a mythic giant who lives in the forest and controls the weather, but about whom unfortunately no stories were collected. Numerous stories of Fox and Wolf, where Fox always tricks and outsmarts Wolf, and stories of Linipinja, the Miami underwater panther. For all their uniqueness to the Miami, Illinois, though, these stories and the style in which they are told, and the traditions surrounding them, are nevertheless squarely in the same tradition as the neighboring Algonquian tribes. While it is regrettable that more Miami, Illinois oral literature was not recorded, what was recorded is rich enough to reward continued study and appreciation for many years to come. Thank you.